I've always thought the best way to stop racism is to stop talking about race. I've got a couple of African sons, and I always say to them, while we honour your African heritage, to be honest, that's the least important or least interesting part of you. Far more interesting is your personality, your gifts, your talents, your character. And it's true you've got an African heritage, but it's not that important. It's incidental, not essential to who you are as a person. So it always surprises me when authorities in this country say the only way we can unite people is by continually dividing everybody according to ethnicity. One Sydney council, Inner West, has decided they've got to fight the scourge of racism. So they've decided to fight racism by spending $280,000 focusing everybody on racial differences. The Inner West Council has developed the first ever anti-racism strategy by a New South Wales council. Here's what it entails. Tell me how this builds unity amongst people in the community. The key features of the strategy include investing $120,000 toward an evidence-based bespoke anti-racism training program to be developed over 2 years with Western Sydney University. Let me pause for a moment just there. I'll come back to the rest of it in a second. What they're going to do is they're going to spend 2 years developing a training course that they're then going to run through with hundreds of people in the Inner West, teaching them to spot racism and then to intervene when and if they see it. I got to tell you, when you see racism, you know it. When my kids are playing on the football field and someone calls them a black so-and-so, in that instant, all of their teammates are right beside them having a go at whoever made the comment, because when you see racism, it's pretty obvious. You don't need a training course that's taken 2 years to develop for you to know what racism is, unless you're looking for microaggressions, in which case you're teaching coloured people to be hypersensitive and you're teaching everybody else to walk on eggshells. It's rubbish. They shouldn't be doing this. It goes on to say another key aspect is $50,000 annually allocated toward artists and community leaders from diverse backgrounds to showcase and develop their cultures. Other funding commitments include $15,000 towards identifying and alleviating the cultural load of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander staff, with the same amount allocated towards commemorating the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination on March 21st. But it doesn't stop there. The council are going to erect 30 racism not welcome signs around the Inner West, as though somehow a racist will see the sign and then think, oh, I'm not allowed to be a racist here. I'll have to go somewhere where the sign does not exist. They're going to erect 3 Aboriginal survival monuments to create cultural safe spaces. In other words, to try to bring us all together, they're going to spend ratepayer money dividing. If you want to unite the country, a much better way would be to take the $280,000 and spend it on Australia Day. Put on a massive barbecue and invite everybody from the community, no matter what the colour of your skin or what your ethnic background. They put this anti-racism strategy online to get feedback from the community. And wouldn't you know it, 40% of the community said they liked it, the rest didn't like it. So even the anti-racism strategy, designed to bring everybody together, has divided the community. We have this thing called a national anthem. It's not very popular among anti-racists, but maybe they should, take notice of it. It begins Australians. That'd be a good place to focus on. Australians all. That's pretty good. Let us rejoice, for we are one and free. If you want an anti-racism strategy, I reckon that's about as far as you need to go, and that's about all you need to know. This attitude that to bring us together, they got to keep dividing us up, Liz, is absolute rubbish and entirely counterproductive. They wonder why we've got social cohesion problems, because even in trying to solve the problem, they make it worse.
Well, it creates way more resentment. Who enjoys going to these workshops in their workplaces? In uni, you get a module being like, you must complete this module, along with all the sexual harassment and don't do this and don't do that type stuff. Nobody, maybe go ahead with the sexual harassment stuff if you find that's a problem on your campus, but in terms of race, they are making this a thing, and what it creates is resentment. Yeah. I've heard it said several times before, and I'm genuinely starting to believe it's true, that the coming generations, and indeed those already born, are going to be way more racist than their grandparents ever were. Because notice, in the West, as our countries have been flooded with people from different parts of the world, that is when all this anti-racism, you can't be racist, had started being pummeled into the Indigenous populations, whether you're talking the UK, America, Canada, Australia, because they know that by creating a melting pot of cultures, people are going to start noticing other people's differences. And that's racism. You can't even acknowledge difference nowadays. Right. It's considered racism. Once upon a time, we used to laugh at each other's differences and get along just fine. You know, we'd be like, oh, these are the Wogs, these are the Greeks, these are the whinging Poms. Nobody cared. Nowadays, we've lost that, like, oh, let's all just get along. And it's due to a lot of these kinds of initiatives.
If you push someone far enough, they will eventually revolt against you, which is basically what we saw with the Voice to Parliament, right? I mean, you went with a piece of policy that was originally about 60-40 in support and ended up being roughly 60-40 against it because people were lectured, all the time, oh, you're racist if you don't support this. And people start to go, well, if you're telling me I'm racist because I'm even questioning the validity of this thing, then I'll vote no because I'll do what you're telling me not to do, which is essentially what you're suggesting happens here, and I think that's correct. You mentioned the national anthem. I think the second verse, isn't it, goes on to say, for those who've come from foreign lands, we have boundless plains to share, so we've already ticked that one off. But as someone who lives in the Inner West Council and has for the entire time I've lived in Sydney...
Did you vote in this poll,
No, I did not vote in this poll because I wasn't aware it existed, just like 99.99% of other people in the Inner West Council. But as someone who's lived there the entirety of my time I've been in Sydney, and it's a place that is very left-wing. Our state member, the member for Balmain, is a Green. The federal member, depending on where you are in the council, is Anthony Albanese or Tanya Plibersek. So we know how people think in the Inner West. I'm just glad that the Inner West Council has now admitted that the people of the Inner West are racist. because if the people of the Inner West weren't racist, you wouldn't need to be training them to be anti-racist, would you? And of course, I mean, my local booth, where I lived before, I've moved suburbs, but I'm just up the road from where I was. My local booth during The Voice, I think, voted 70% in favour of The Voice. So I think we're probably quite right to say that they're a bunch of racists in the Inner West.
You could be chosen, Caleb, for some of this bespoke anti-racism training.
Well, they would think I need it because I voted against The Voice. I would say they need it because they voted for The Voice.